Poland is warning it's closer to conflict than it's ever been since the Second World War after its fighter jets shot down suspected Russian drones that it says committed repeated violations of its airspace during an attack on Ukraine. Now, Moscow has denied responsibility, but the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says the incident is an act of aggression by Russia. So could there be a response by Poland and broader NATO? Keir Giles is Senior Consulting Fellow at Chatham House's Russia and Eurasia program, and he joins me now. Keir, good to have you with us this evening. Now, how do you see this drone incursion? Because Russia is denying responsibility for the incident, but Poland says no, it doesn't believe that, it believes that it was targeted.
Well, it's important to bear in mind exactly what Russia has and has not said. They have not denied the incident. They have said that they did not plan to attack Poland, and that's an important distinction. Nobody's in any doubt that these are Russian drones that have landed in Poland. The only ongoing conversation of it is about how intentional that was, whether this was a deliberate attempt by Russia to probe and test Polish and NATO and European responses, or whether, as Belarus, for example, has suggested, Poland's neighbor, these were strikes which were intended to land in Ukraine, but veered off course as a result of electronic warfare. For Europe, though, the issue is exactly the same. It is how to find a response to Russia to make sure that this does not happen again, rather than Moscow coming away from this assured that there are no consequences.
Yes, if it is deliberate, and as you say, this is perhaps Russia testing the grounds with Poland, what might Putin be thinking with what the military has done here?
Well, if this is an intentional probe, then Russia learns a great deal from it. They learn not only about the immediate capacity of Poland to deal with challenges of this kind, to deal with air threats from Russia, and that capacity has been shown to be fairly limited, even with support from NATO air policing detachments that were present in Poland at the time. It also learns about European unity, about how far Russia can push, how close they can get to an act of war before prompting a response from the rest of Europe. And most crucially of all, of course, it tells them how the United States is going to respond if they do something aggressive in Eastern Europe. And they can be reassured at the moment, based on how Donald Trump has responded so far, that they are still comfortable in being able to aggress further in Europe without triggering any kind of reaction from the US that would be damaging.
Yes, so if Russia is sort of playing in between here, but in the meantime, Poland is on the front line. It shares that border with the Russian territory of Kaliningrad. Would this sort of alarm Poland into making more significant preparations for other incidents like this that may occur in the future?
Well, Poland has been preparing for years. They're several years into a crash rearmament program because they've looked at Russia's plans in the region and the war in Ukraine and realized that they need to increase their defense budget, more than doubling it over recent years, also massively increase the size of their armed forces. Now, that, of course, raises the question of, with all these preparations, how relevant were they to the kind of threat that Russia is now posing if they weren't able to intercept these small numbers of drones, a relatively tiny number compared to the number that swamps Ukraine every night. So that will be the subject of active discussion in Poland already. But there's no doubt there as to the immediacy of the threat and the steps that need to be taken to meet it.
Yes, and if one is living in Poland, is the question of Russian invasion a live question, but at the back of their minds? Perhaps not now, but in years to come, given how close they are to Russia.
The question of Russian aggression is a live one in all of those frontline states, because all of them are asking themselves who is the next target for Russia, either after major combat operations in Ukraine cease and Russian forces are freed up for their next target, or even during the Ukraine conflict if Russia uses some of its other assets that aren't committed there. So it is a constant topic of conversation, and it's the driver for this intense military rearmament, reorganization, and also measures to protect the civilian population, because people living in these countries see the way in which Russia targets innocent civilians across Ukraine and know that they need to find ways of protecting themselves, their society, their economy when it comes their turn to be the victim.
So in that vein, Keir, was it justified of the Polish President Karol Nawrocki to come out and say that Vladimir Putin was ready to invade more countries?
Well, there's no doubt that Vladimir Putin is ready to invade more countries. That is part of how Vladimir Putin has set out his vision for re-establishing Russian power over the region that he believes should be governed from Moscow. He said very clearly that the borders of Eastern Europe need to be revised, and that is exactly the threat which all of these countries are preparing for.
Yes, and finally, Keir, Poland has invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty, demanding consultation with its member states. Materially, though, what's the significance of invoking this treaty?
Well, there are different articles of the North Atlantic Treaty, that founding treaty of NATO, which provide for different situations. Article 5 is the one most people have heard of. That's the one that says an armed attack on one country has to be considered an armed attack against all of them. Poland has not gone that far, possibly because it might not have had the confidence that it would actually get that unanimous backing from the rest of NATO, because it's a fairly major step. Article 4 is, if you like, a kind of soft option. It says, we're in a crisis, let's talk. It calls for urgent consultations between NATO member states. Now, what exactly the results of those consultations are and whether it might move NATO to action, we don't know yet, but this is a rapidly evolving situation.
Yes. What's your assessment of how other NATO states, particularly those in Western Europe, how prepared are they to perhaps assist countries like Poland that are in the front lines? What is your assessment of the preparedness of those countries?
Well, we've heard of commitments from a range of Western European countries now, including the UK, including the Netherlands, to send additional military assets to Poland to help protect it. Of course, another question is how relevant those are going to be if they're not actually the kind of assets that will deal with drone strikes of this kind, which Poland has found itself in difficulties with, and of course, where they create problems and shortages elsewhere. But overall, the biggest problem is that it is the frontline states, the countries of Eastern Europe, that are far in the lead in terms of rearmament and getting ready for what Russia does next. Western Europe, the countries west of Warsaw, is far behind and has a long way to catch up to be anywhere near ready for what is coming.
Okay, Keir Giles, really appreciate your analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.